Hi everyone. So now that we've installed Unity Hub, we can actually explore the Unity editor. So right here, I'm going to open the Unity Hub for the kind of second time. You should have installed in the last video a version of Unity, and right now I have 2019 1.9. Check with your course to see which version you should be using, and I can uh, go to the projects menu, and you can see all these projects that I've been working on for different classes and for projects outside of Berkeley. And what I'm going to do is click New. And what it's going to ask me is it's going to give me some templates. I'm going to do 3D template, call it New Unity template, New Unity project just for fun right now. And I'm going to put it on my desktop just because it's a little bit easier to find it later on. But put it wherever you can find it, and then hit create. And then it's going to create it with 2019 1.9 up here, which is kind of the latest version or whatever version that you have installed. Then it does a little bit of setup for you, and actually it's created a brand new folder on my desktop, and you can see that in the upper corner here, New Unity Project. And what it's doing is importing some assets to get it ready and up and running. These are the default scripts that sort of come with Unity. Scripts are a game development engine's way of extending the functionality of the game itself, whether it's scoring or puzzles or things like that. And what it's done is it created a sample scene for me, and it's created some things. So let's talk about this window a little bit. This is the default window. If you're ever not seeing if it looks different than this, what you want to do is go to Layouts under the Window menu, Layouts, and then go to Default, and it will give you the default layout here. And this is the simplest one, where it gives us a hierarchy, the scene, the inspector, and then the project with a console window next to it. And what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of explore a little bit of each one of these parts of the window to show you around Unity. One of the things in our sample scene, so our hierarchy is all the things that are in our game space. And you can see there's a little icon here. That's a light. And inside the sample scene, we can click on directional light, and then it will kind of highlight it in here, and we can move it around using the move tool, which is up here. So these are tools that allow us to kind of rotate and move things around. And the main camera over here, this is kind of, think of this as a film set in a way, and your main camera is pointed at a specific direction. So we can add things to this scene if we want by going up to the Game Object menu and creating a 3D object. So let's create a plane. A plane is a surface, and that surface in our world right now, we can move that around using these little arrows here. If you're not seeing these arrows, make sure that you're selected on the Move tool as opposed to this tool, which is the Hand tool. So Move tool is what we want, and allows us to move things around. Now, one of the things when we hit play now, this would play our game, and essentially our main camera just looks at our plane off to the side. And if we wanted to change the orientation, for instance, bring our plane down in the world, then our camera off to the side is kind of looking at the top of it instead. And we can move those things around if we want. We can also create new other types of games objects like a cube. By the way, you can see over here, we're just adding the cube here, adding the plane, and now when I hit play, the camera is going to look at that cube in space. We can't move around yet. We need some additional scripts to add to this project to move around in this scene, and we're going to do that in a separate video so we can move around in this little 3D scene that we have. Because right now the main camera is just stationary, sort of placed off to the side. If I want to move the camera closer to the cube, I can do that and hit play. And now we're a little bit closer in our scene. A few other things. So we've talked about the hierarchy over here, and right now there's a little asterisk there next to our sample scene because I haven't saved it yet. As soon as I save it using the file menu, save, that asterisk will go away because I haven't, that asterisk means that I've changed something but haven't saved it yet. Now, whenever I click on an object over here in the inspector over on the right, it's giving me some information about that object itself. So if I want to, for instance, select the cube and then change its scale, it has position, rotation, and scale. Let's change its scale so it's taller. So the y-axis goes up and down. So let's change that to 5, and now it's much taller, right? And I can move it up a little bit. Again, if I hit play, then our camera will see sort of a large object. And we can change the x-axis, which is side to side, so we can change that to 5 too. And so now we sort of built a wall. The z-axis is front to back, so we could change that too if we wanted to say 0.5. So now it's a slightly thinner wall. And if I hit play, then the camera is looking at this wall here. There are other things that we can change, like the position. Whenever I change the position here, you can see over on the right-hand inspector that's changing the y coordinates to reflect where I placed it in the world. Rotation is rotates around an axis. So if I rotate it around the x-axis, which is the sort of side-to-side axis, and I go 90 degrees, then I've sort of flipped it on its side. If I want to change it around the y-axis, which is up and down, you'll see that if I flip it 90 degrees, I've flipped it kind of the other way. And when I hit play, you can see that I've moved it like that. There are other things that make up this cube here, including a mesh and a mesh renderer. That's kind of the outside of the cube so that when we look at it, we see it, and we can change the color of that by adding a material onto it and things like that. There's also a collider, which means that if I'm walking in the space that I can't go through this wall, that's the collider itself, and that looks at collisions within the world, and if I collide with something, like a character collides with the wall, they can't actually walk through the wall. You can change this to a trigger, which means they can walk through it and it will fire an event like a script that plays a sound or something like that. Right now I have a standard default material, but if I wanted to, I could actually create a new material. And that's what we're going to kind of do, is kind of look at the next part, which is our project window here. This is a version of our desktop or Finder. So if I go back to the Finder here and look at our new Unity project, in the Assets folder, you'll see a folder called Scenes, and it's got our sample scene in it. And if I go over to the Unity project itself, you'll see Scenes, and I double click that, and I have sample scene. You may be asking yourself, well, what are these meta files? These meta files help Unity sort of keep track of additional data associated with those assets. Right now I have an asset called sample scene, but let's create another asset. Let's create a material. So if I go to the assets folder here, I can create a new material by right-clicking, create, and then a material. I've created a new material, and let's call this red material. And then over here on the right, I can actually select the color, and I'll select red, like this. And so what I've basically done is just created a red material that I can drag and drop onto objects, like my cube. And when I do that, I've added a red material onto my cube, which is not really a cube anymore. In fact, it's a wall. So if I want to change the name, I would go up here and say, all right, cube, we're going to change this to wall. And one of the things, and so you'll see it over here in our sample scene, and we need to save it. I'll do that now. And you'll see that I've added a red material to that object. We can also add other types of components, like audio sources, which are kind of speakers within our world. And so I can add a speaker to this if I want to. So let's do that. So let's add a component. So I've got my wall selected, and I add a component. And I'm going to start typing in audio source, and that will give me the audio source here. There's another way to add a component, which is to go up to the, still selected on wall, is to go up to the game object menu itself, go to game audio, to the audio submenu, and select audio source. And that will add kind of a speaker to our world. Actually, it added a speaker to our world, but didn't attach it to our wall here. So I'll actually delete this and try again. What we want to do is add a component. So adding a component, in order to do that, you can't do it in the game object. You actually have to do it over here where you say add component. We're going to add an audio source. So just begin typing it and you'll see the different types of audio objects we can add. The audio source is a speaker and it has a bunch of components with it. So I'm going to save my scene and then I'm going to find a WAV file that I can add to my scene. So what I'll do is just go to my Finder. I was just dealing with a WAV file before, so I'm going to go to find that and pull it from a different project. So this is just any WAV file will actually work. And so I have a drone here, and if I drag that drone to my assets folder in my project, it will actually copy that into my project folder. So when I go back to my desktop here and look at my new Unity project, you can see in the assets folder, oh, I have that red material and I have that drone in there because I copied it into my project. So everything that's in the project folder here is everything that Unity needs to create the game that we're kind of creating. Right now it's not really a game, but what we can do is we have this audio source on this wall here, this wall that we added before when we added the component. What we can do is actually select, so it's a speaker in our world, and we can select what it plays using the audio clip property of the audio source. So in order to do that, we click on this little circle icon here, and it will bring up all the audio files in our scene. And I'll click the drone. And one of the things that it will do is there's a property called play on awake. So when I hit play, it will actually play this sound. So let's hear it. So it played that drone file because I had this audio source attached to this wall. Now, let's move the wall back like this and play it again. So, oh, by the way, I can zoom in and out by using the scroll knob on a mouse or using 2 fingers on a trackpad to pull out. You can also do it in some other ways too, but those are the 2 most easiest ways to do it. You can also, if you right click, you can move around the scene, kind of rotate your viewer position, and you can see that I've moved this wall much farther away from the actual camera. So now when I hit play, it still plays, and it still plays at the same volume. Now, we haven't introduced what's called a 3D element to make it dissipate as we sort of move this wall away. And what we'll do here is we'll actually change this sound, this audio source, the speaker, from 2D to 3D. So now if it's in 3D, it will actually spatialize. So I'm going to move it to the right side like that. And now when I hit play, it will play more towards the right now and a little bit more further away. And now if I move it to the left-hand side like this, it's a little quiet. Now it's playing more out of the left side because the orientation is related to this main camera. If I look at the main camera, there's actually an audio listener on it. That means those are my ears within the world. That's my relative position to this audio source that I'm kind of moving back and forth on my wall. If I want to change the volume, I can change the volume using another parameter. I don't know if it will go, yeah, it won't go over 1. So we can't make that sound actually louder at this point with the tools that we have. We can do it in a different way later on. There are other things about the audio source or that speaker in our world that we can change, including mute, bypass effects, etc. In our world. And we'll learn about some of those other things in a different video tutorial. Anyways, this gives you a little bit of an idea how all this works. We haven't talked about the console window. The console window will bring up errors if you have errors, and you may encounter errors along the way. It will also bring up information about your project sometimes too, where you'll want to know something or print out some information. So it's a way of sort of getting information about your project. We won't really talk about that in this video, but in future tutorials we'll talk about that. All right, that's a little bit of an introduction to Unity. What I can do now is when I quit out of Unity as a last part of this, remember my new Unity project just sits here on my desktop, but if I go to the Unity Hub, you'll see that that project has been added to my recent projects here. And I can go ahead and click on it again, and then it will open the appropriate version of Unity, kind of where I left off, like this. Okay, let me know if you have questions, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.